Welcome to a very special bonus episode of the Remarkable Retail Podcast. We're live at Shoptalk in Las Vegas. Hey, Steve, how are you?
I'm great. I'm a little tired, but I'm great.
Well, so much to cover about. This is a special bonus episode. I think it's the first bonus episode that we've done in our series.
I think that's right.
And it's also the first time you and I have been together since we launched the podcast, so it's great to see you, my friend.
Very scary. Yeah. Yes, but no. How many episodes have we done? Like 75 or something?
Yeah.
And first time live in person looking at the Vegas Strip.
Yeah, well, high above the Las Vegas Sands, as the Nazareth would say, and we're here to do a quick recap. It's Wednesday morning, and we're about to jump on some airplanes and head home, so I thought let's take advantage of the opportunity to get in front of each other and put out a bonus episode, kind of a recap for those who perhaps weren't able to make it to Shoptalk. You were on the stage, you were moderating. I love the format, by the way, that you were kind of doing the interview. And what do they call it?
It's called the talk show
format.
Right.
Yeah, I love that. Right. I love that because when I was, and we'll get to your session in a bit, but you had three people, and you had one end you had Target, and another end you had a small indie, Andy Swim or Andy, and I'm like, how do these folks coexist on a panel? As you know, that's a little tough, right? Scale,
right.
But the talk show format I really love because you got so much quality content out of each, and collectively it was a great session. So
yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I think the one at a time with an overarching theme, I think that works really well, particularly to your point if you have diverse retailers, diverse kind of backgrounds. Each
with great stories and great insights, but just different, right? Different scale and, the degree to which they can put stuff into it. All right. Well, let's get into it. So, where do we start? Well, let's talk about the vibe. I mean, people are here together. We're seeing people we've had on the podcast and, only seen them only heard them, and we're seeing people we haven't seen in a while. So what's your overall sense of the vibe of the show and the level of excitement and interest, and what's your kind of overview?
Sound like Trump there. There was tremendous energy. Tremendous energy.
It's a beautiful show.
We enjoyed it bigly. No, it was great. I mean, 10,000 people, which is a record attendance to Shoptalk, I understand. And it was a little weird to be around so many people.
Yeah.
But I think people were really, speaking for myself, I was excited to get back out there. It was great to catch up with, dozens of people that I haven't seen in 2+ years.
Yeah.
A bunch of people that I feel like I know through social media, but I've never met in person.
Yeah.
And just randomly running into people. So I felt like I spent way more time just chitting and chatting on the show floor or running into people and walking back to the hotel and the casino or whatever. So so that's fun. But I think people are really excited to be back together. They're calling it the big retail reunion or something.
Yeah.
So and that's the way it felt.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's approach this by both casual or anecdotal conversations you've had versus what you heard from the stage in terms of learning. So on the former, so when you just kind of in the hall, you were just saying you were just talking to Lauren from CNBC, and people, hey, what's going on? And you kind of just chit and chat amongst yourself. What themes or trends did you pick up just talking to people who are a little, not off the stage, a little less scripted, not in front of 100,000 people or whatever,
right?
Just chitting and chatting. Anything come up?
I think there were a couple of things. Definitely had a bunch of conversations about, essentially they were, what did you think about this
what we
talk
just saw,
or whatever? Maybe it was a talk that I wasn't at, but it clearly was being picked up on social media. So, is the metaverse for real? Lots of talk about sustainability, but, then there's Shein, that's this massive company that's not sustainable at all. Like, how do you reconcile the supposed interest in sustainability against some of the things that actually happened? So there was a lot of reacting, live streaming, so some of these broad trends that were talked about as the next great thing, perhaps, or on this massive trajectory, is it for real? What do you think? So that was one. The other set I would say is just what's the pace of business? How much is inflation going to affect things? What are, as I talked to some retailers, but also some analysts or people that have access to customer data, what is that looking like? And that was actually kind of depressing, I would say, because most of what I heard there was things are really starting to slow down.
What did you call it? The Great Deceleration.
Deceleration. We'll see how much it ends up decelerating, but it definitely looks like a flattening of the curve.
Well, the party's got to. Listen, the music's got to stop, or the party's got to slow down at some point. We've had just such record numbers, and you know what? I talked to retailers who we expected a slowdown because eventually, we've been talking about this for 2 years, people will shift back to services. I mean, we're here in Vegas.
I was going to say, if any indication of how busy Vegas is, definitely seems like people are out and about, and so some of that shift back to services can take away from products. The inflation at some point, like it's basic economics, right? Prices go up, demand is going to be affected. So that was as much as there's this ebullience in the air from being back together again, and some plenty of sexy technology, plenty of really cool things that are happening on the part of many companies. I think there was a little bit of this things might get a little bit tough the balance of the year.
I picked that up in this thread, and I guess one of the threads is, and we'll talk about this later, is how to generate new business, and do we turn our minds to just being better at what we do with our existing customers, right? We've heard that this treadmill of always acquiring new, we got growth, but and I saw that from when I walked the show floor. I saw a lot of vendors who were really focused on how do you do and have a better relationship with your customer versus acquiring customer. And, there's probably, there's vendors who do both, but, I think retailers typically when things slow down, they say, well, if I've got less store traffic or less website traffic, let's do more with the traffic we have. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, right?
I think it's got to be balanced. I mean, it depends on where you are in your maturity curve. But I mean, if you spent all this money to acquire a customer, to not pay attention to, how to retain them, certainly, but also how much growth potential is there and what does that look like? Whether that's trading them up or cross-selling or, this whole set of things. So I think it's got to be balanced, and it depends a lot on where you are. But yes, when we've got a lot of, particularly at this show, you've got a lot of the so-called disruptor brands that get showcased here, and many of them are very, very focused on this rapid growth, and that means a lot of new customer growth.
Right. Well, let's talk about what you saw on the stage, and we'll get to your session and talk about that a little bit more, share what the insights that came out from the folks that you were chatting to. So, as we sat in the audience listening to different people present, I enjoyed, for example, the woman who leads Sam's Club.
Yeah, that was
talking about what she did, very insightful and such tremendous integration of technology. And they've got things that I can only imagine in Canada, curbside at a Sam's type format store. I mean, we don't have that at Costco in Canada. Sam's isn't in Canada, by the way. Interesting.
Yes, I didn't realize that until you said that. I just kind of assumed they had.
Well, it's funny because they were in Canada briefly for a little while and then exited. And then, so in Canada, Costco owns that wholesale club market, like lock, stock, and barrel. And conversely, Walmart is a very great presence in Canada. It's not like they couldn't figure out the U.S. to Canada model, right? Walmart's nailed it. They're doing very well. Home Depot, lots of great U.S.-based retailers are very successful in Canada. So it's just an interesting little quirk as I listened to her. But what did you hear from the stage that jumped out at you? Well,
Sam, just quickly on Sam's Club, what I thought was interesting there, to your earlier point, there's a brand that is expanded greatly. I think every major market in the U.S. for years, and they're really focusing on getting more out of their existing club. I mean, her story was not about we got all these new formats, or we've got all this e-commerce growth, or whatever. It was really about how to do more with their existing customers, and a lot of that was technology driven. The thing that she talked about I really liked, I think they called it scan and ship. So if you're in the club and there's big bulky items, you can scan the item to have it delivered to your home. And I'm not sure that's like this massive opportunity, but I think it's a good example of thinking through the customer journey and thinking about either ways you can take friction out of it or add some little extra value. And it seemed like they've really been going through kind of every piece of the model and thinking about not just technology, but how technology can be used to improve the business.
That's an interesting one, because when you shop on, my experience, not with Sam's but with Costco in Canada, is when you buy online, they ship for free, but the prices are different than they are in the warehouse. So, if it's $10 online, it's $7 in the warehouse. There's always like a $3 difference, right? So it ships for free, but you're paying a premium. So that's interesting. I wonder if you're paying a premium to have it shipped to home, or you're paying the actual walk-in warehouse price. Anyway,
more question. Don't know. You have to get the research team on that.
have to do a tour of Sam's Clubs and figure out how that goes. So what else? What else did you hear?
So yesterday, Dara, the CEO of Uber, was talking about their sort of broad plans, which align against how to get you places, with the mobility, Uber part of their, the original Uber part of their business, and then how to get things to you. That was kind of the way he divvied it up, and how they're expanding off of the Uber Eats platform into Uber No Eats things. And then it was a really good kind of overview of how to think about the market of making your life easier by getting you the places you need to go or bringing you the things you need to run your life. So I just thought it was an interesting framing of that. And he definitely talked a little bit of smack about some of the other players that don't make any money and don't have the scale that they do. I thought that was interesting. Dave Gilboa from Warby Parker actually spoke right before or right after Dara, talking about Warby Parkers. And that, one of the issues that came up, I want to tie it to something that our friend Jason Goldberg talked about, was how Warby is thinking about marketing and how they have not backed away completely, but they have shifted away from what sometimes people call performance marketing, but really this highly targeted, leveraging data insight,
understand the ROAS and all the
digital marketing through Facebook and Instagram. And essentially, what he said, which we've touched on a bunch of times, is that's become unbelievably expensive. And I believe he said that they found that they're spending a lot of money just to sort of chase customers, and they really want to build a brand that people naturally go to, and so they're actually using TV advertising, radio advertising, sort of old school marketing.
Can you imagine having that conversation 3 years ago? Where are you going to spend your money? TV.
Yeah, and also I think he also just kind of somewhat alluded to this, is that their stores are billboards, and so how do you get that top of mind brand awareness that gets your customer to think of you first, as opposed to just kind of blasting into their feed and paying, Facebook, Instagram, $50, $60, $70 to get that sale. Jason Goldberg was talking about that more broadly and talking about how hard it is to, at a certain scale, to get performance marketing to work for you, and the big differences, which, when he said it, I thought, this intuitively makes sense. But if you look at the bigger brands and what happens online, the percentage of time that somebody just types in the brand name into search to get to the website, which is at the margin is free, versus trying to, like I said earlier, blast into your feed, interrupt whatever the person is doing to try to pull them away to your site to sell them something. That's become more and more expensive. The iOS changes has made that even more expensive and difficult. So, he basically said that Jason said this is the reason why so many of these digitally native vertical brands have really struggled to be profitable, because the marginal cost of adding a customer is way higher, it turns out, than the lifetime value of that customer. So they're going to have to really...
It's not great math, right?
It's terrible. It's terrible math, and, topic for another day. But, I think this, really continues to explain some of the struggles we're seeing with some of these brands. So this kind of, I don't want to say it's a pivot away from performance marketing, but it's just kind of understanding better the challenges and seeing really, frankly, how some of the big brands benefit, because the smaller brands are trying to steal their customers away, and that turns out not to be so easy.
Let's talk about another couple, I guess, we'll call them customer drivers or engagers, the metaverse and live streaming. I heard a lot about both. Metaverse, and we did a bunch of interviews here, talked to a bunch of people. It seems a little polarizing. Some people think, nobody can define it. What is it? It's a bit of a hustle. And then the other side, just some folks who are saying they think there's a there. We heard lots of talk about the metaverse. Any early insights on that? And we're actually going to have some folks from Meta on the podcast later in the season.
Going to get meta about Meta or something. Yeah.
But any just from what you've heard, and we'll get into the whole Meta thing when we get our Meta guest. But
I agree that it is absolutely very polarizing. My answer is I don't know. I think it could turn out to be very promising. I heard another speaker. I don't think she was talking about the metaverse in particular. It really had to do with this idea of experimentation, where she said you should think big, start small, scale fast.
I love that.
And I think that's the way to think about a lot of things. I mean, it's very possible that the metaverse could be huge. Is it going to be a big thing anytime soon? I think that's very unlikely. Should most brands be testing and exploring?
Or at least paying attention, right? I mean, that's why you come to conferences like this. Is
start out, learn more.
Yeah.
Should you stand up some pilots? Maybe yes, maybe no.
Yeah.
Take a bit of a wait and see. But if you're not, you have to be paying attention to it and trying to figure out what it might mean. But I think that's probably the most polarizing topic. Live stream, I think, maybe not quite as polarizing, but I think the narrative with live streaming has been it's huge in China. Why isn't it huge in the U.S.? Yeah. And I think that's a little bit of a false equivalency. The Chinese market, I mean, there's lots of stuff from China that people should be paying attention to. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't.
Not everything. It's not the future necessarily. Not everything translates.
There's, the China market, retail market developed much differently than North American markets, Western European markets. And so I think it's really hard to say that automatically it will move over. You also have such concentration with Alibaba, JD, and other. There's it's just so. Again, it's one of these things I think should study. Might be right for business, but I'm not of the opinion that you can just sort of take China's numbers and say that's where we're going to be in 3 years or something.
I heard it go in two different directions, one level down. One was how do we get the associates involved in social media as influencers, and maybe there's a media component. We saw a bit of that during the peak of the pandemic.
Right.
Is there? And on the other side, how do we integrate live streaming into the platforms so that, as you said, you happen to be on Instagram and you see your favorite brand is live streaming a quick presentation. I think there's some power in that.
Yeah.
I think folks are starting to get their heads around it. My advice to them all, anyone who's listening, is pay attention to QVC, HSN, the trade craft of live selling. Right. It looks easy, but it is a trade craft. So it's, the technology probably is getting to be, I won't say the easy part, but pretty easy-ish.
Yeah.
You've got the platforms to help you get in front of the people, whether you interrupt them, whether that's a good idea or not. But the art of selling is a very refined art. So that would be
I think it's a great point.
That would be my my advice. So let's finish off on this bonus Shop Talk bonus episode on your panel, your session. I keep calling it a panel, but as we described, it was more the talk show format. So talk about who you spoke with and what your impressions were for the session.
Yeah, this was there across the 3 days, I think, or at least the first 2 days. There's a series of talks, presentations, whatever, on elevating the store. My particular panel was new tools and technologies for the retail store. So we had Nancy King, who's the SVP of Product Engineering at Target, Scott Perry, who's the head of digital for Jerome's Furniture, which is a big regional furniture chain, and then Melanie Travis, who's the CEO and founder of Andy Swim. And I started off just talking about, what I've been saying for years is, it turns out physical retail isn't dead, but it's also, changing. The role of stores changing. There's more kind of hybridization of the role of the stores. And so that's kind of what we got into, in particular with Nancy, talking about how Target has invested billions of dollars to reconfigure their stores in pretty fundamental ways, really leveraging the store for fulfillment. The stat that Target, about 20% of their business is ordered online, and of that, 96% of it is fulfilled from the store. Yeah. So that is curbside, BOPIS, shipped from store through the mail, home delivered. And they've gone just through this massive effort to put in new technologies. We got a little bit into what's the back of the store look like.
Yeah, that was a great question, by the way. Like, if you cast your mind back 5 years ago, how is the store structurally different? What does the store look like?
Yeah, and just quickly on that, I'm sure a lot of people will know there's been this, multi-decade movement to really eliminate or shrink
the back room.
Back room. I was involved in multiple projects over the years on that. But that was because, number one, it's good to get as much stuff in front of the customer, but number two was just really kind of flow the product from the supply chain onto the floor. But Target has completely turned that around, so they're putting in shelving and robotics in some cases, and redesigning the workflow in the stores, and the results have been amazing. Part of why we wanted to have Target was, here's an old school retailer that you would think was pretty mature, could be very vulnerable to Amazon and others' growth, and yet they have done more than hold their own. With Scott, we talked about Jerome's had developed their website and their general digital capabilities quite a lot, but they wanted to bring some of that into the store, and so he just talked through, not to, because I think this has been a bad move where people think, well, we want to make our stores more like the website. Well, I think you have to understand that shopping online versus shopping in a store are not identical, and there are different kinds of things. So he just kind of talked through how they're using QR technology, how they're using data across channels to personalize the experience. I thought that was pretty interesting.
And I liked your question about how you engage with the commission sales team, because that is a key element in many furniture.
Right. Yeah. I think
stuff.
you and I both have had experience working with commission sales forces. And, certainly in the early days of the internet, it was like, well, I don't want to help somebody in the store just to have them go home. And why would I want to do that? I don't make any money. And, it seems very selfish, but, that's the reality, right,
Sure.
of how people earn a living. So, he talked through how they did that and how, sort of seeing the internet as your friend, because people are coming in, which was my experience at both Sears and Neiman's, that people are coming in many cases, much more ready to buy because they did their research online, and now they come in and say, hey, show me this. I want to try this on.
Much more qualified leads, so to speak.
Yeah,
they're coming in,
exactly.
they're 95% of the way there, and you just need to help close that deal. Crucial, though.
Yeah, no, you have to be very sensitive to it. And also I think they've been giving their sales associates more tools to help them.
Yeah.
In general, that's a great way to think about this, multi-channel, omni-channel, harmonized, whatever customer. Melanie from Andy. So Andy's only about 5 years old. They've raised a good amount of venture capital money.
Is it $20 million?
I think most recently $20 million. I think they may have raised 30
done a couple of raises.
total.
That's great.
Which is pretty nice for a pretty small brand. They just recently opened their first store in West Palm Beach. They're about to open some more. So we talked through what was it like to translate an online-only experience into a store, and things just like the assortment's different. You sell lots of black swimwear
that
online,
was interesting, yeah.
But if you just translated your online mix to a store, you'd have like 80% black swimsuits, right? And so
the black swimsuit,
which I actually experienced when working with Land's End when opening stores, that the online assortment doesn't necessarily translate exactly to the store. So I thought I thought it was very interesting, and just some of the things that she's learning about how the store has to evolve, and she absolutely sees the store as being, as most of these digitally native vertical brands have realized that stores are going to be important to their future growth and making some money, maybe.
Well, listen, it's a great summary. It's great to be back out, seeing people, hearing them in person, and experiencing the conference world again. It won't be our last, hopefully, this year. Hopefully, we'll bounce back. I'm in a couple of food shows, actually, in Canada coming up. I've got some scheduled up. Anything you're going to in the next couple of months that comes up?
I've been looking at a bunch of things. I'm trying to decide what I wanted to do. I actually wanted to go to Shoptalk Europe, which is in London. They're not a sponsor. Maybe they should be, but there is a Shoptalk Europe beginning of June. But I absolutely have to be back a few days after that, and I don't know that I can risk possibly getting stuck in the UK.
Yeah. Well, anyway, listen. Yeah, great bonus episode, our first bonus episode, and a shout out to the listeners. We'll actually, for our next episode coming up, next regular scheduled episode, we're going to have Michelle Poole from Crocs. We've got that interview already in the can, so to speak. And you mentioned Nancy King, who was on your panel. We're going to have Nancy on the podcast.
Yeah, that's going to be great. I mean, I think I felt when I was interviewing her, I had like 20 more questions, so I don't know if we'll get through 20 questions on the episode, but we'll have a little bit more time to delve into the Target story, which will be great.
And thanks again to the folks at Shoptalk for hosting us, Steve and I here. It was great to be here, and I also shout out to all the folks from Rethink Retail, because we got together with our fellow Rethink Retail influencers, and the Rethink Retail folks brought us together for a session last night, which was just a pile of fun, so it was great to see you. All right, well, let's wrap this bonus episode for Remarkable Retail. Thanks, Steve. Great to see you. Not
Likewise.
just hear your voice and see you on camera, and look forward to chatting with you next week.
Sounds good.
If you like what you heard, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform so you can catch up with all our great interviews and insights, and new episodes will show up each and every week. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel, and last but not least, tell your friends and colleagues in the retail industry all about us.
And I'm Steve Dennis, author of the best-selling book, Remarkable Retail, How to Win and Keep Customers in the Age of Disruption. You can learn more about me, my consulting, and keynote speaking at stephenpdennis.com.
And I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and co-host of the Conversations of Commerce Next podcast, the Voice of Retail podcast, keynote speaker, and host of the all-new Last Request Barbecue Cooking Show on YouTube. And you can learn even more about me on LinkedIn or emmyleblanc.co. Have a safe week, everyone.